All right. So now it's 10 o'clock. So I think we can start. I give on behalf of the UNU, the United Nations University, a very warm welcome, and I welcome everybody who has joined today. The second webinar in context of the House of No Waste competition. My name is Benjamin Horsbach, architect from Berlin, and I have the honor and pleasure to serve as competition advisor to this process. It is also a great pleasure to welcome some of our jury members and Marc Angelil as advisory board member here in our call to give presentations to enrich the discussions for everybody who is interested in joining this competition. 2 weeks ago, and in this moment, I should maybe share the presentation. Right, here we are. 2 weeks ago, we had already a first webinar where we had Mark Lee and some others joining and giving first presentations from jury members. And all of them are recorded, and I strongly recommend you to listen and watch to this recording because it was quite a interesting presentation and discussion we had among the jury members, Barbara Buser and Sergei Sheret-Momo and Mark Lee, presenting 3 very different projects as their their initial thought for themselves, what they had in mind to could be a house of no waste. There were very small-scale buildings from Ethiopia presented by Sergei. We had the principles of the transfer office by Barbara Buser being presented. And finally, we had a project by Herzog de Meuron presented by Mark Lee, a project in New York for the regeneration of the Park Avenue Armory. So this is what we recommend you to go back. Today we will get new impressions. But first of all, I would like to pass the floor to Edeltraud Günther, director of the UNU Flores Institute in Dresden, Germany.
It's wonderful. So welcome to this webinar. I'm the director of an institute of United Nations University. United Nations University celebrates its 50th anniversary this year. We have 13 institutes, and our institute focuses on the integrated management of environmental resources, what we also call the resource nexus. And one of our focus areas is sustainable buildings and construction. We also work on the food sector, on electronics, on textiles, on mining. But this specific focus area deals with the question, how shall the future of construction of buildings look like? And one vision we developed over the course of the years is not only to have a competition, but really to rethink buildings as a whole. And that also means that we do not only see the resources that go into buildings and ask ourselves what can happen with those resources after the lifetime of a building, but how can the whole building be regenerative? And therefore, this wording also has developed over the course of the years that we said it should be buildings, houses of no waste of resources, no waste of energy, no waste of water, no waste of costs, and also no waste of ideas, so that we also have the social element. As I already said, our focus are environmental resources and their interconnectivity, what we call the nexus of resources, the resource nexus. And as I already said, it's not only about the environment, but it's also about society. when we discuss, for example, the innovative potential of buildings. How do people come together? How are they inspired when they go into buildings? One element that could be interesting for you joining this webinar is that we as UNU, as United Nations University, are leading the priority action on research of the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction under UNEP. And there we have 360 members, and many of them are also research institutes, but it's also member states, it's companies, it's NGOs. So it could also be interesting for you to look into this whole website and activities of Global ABC. Why does it matter? I already mentioned we want to avoid waste of materials, of water, of energy, of emissions, but it goes beyond. We really see the potential for transformation of buildings. And something when you develop your idea and your submission, it's also important that you have an idea how can it be replicable in other countries, in other contexts. Can elements be replicable? So that's up to you. And what I already mentioned, always also think about the people living there, working there, communities, but also the cultural context. The UN has 193 member states, and the context is different in all those countries, in all those member states, but even within countries, it's very different. Between you have communities there. What do we expect? Of course, it's a competition. Of course, we expect prizes, but it's way more. We really can offer to you also visibility, not only on a UNU platform, but on a UN platform. We are a UN agency. Our rector is an Undersecretary General. So there is Guterres, the Secretary General, there are the Undersecretary General, and then the directors of the Institute. So we have quite a close link also to the Secretariat of the United Nations. And just last week, the Scientific Advisory Board of Guterres discussed new topics. Currently, they have 3 main topics. It's climate change, biotechnology, and AI. And I got a photo where they discussed, it's not yet decided, but at least it was already brought to the discussion that sustainable buildings and construction should be an intense topic for the Scientific Advisory Board of the Secretary General. And that also means you can use this competition also to showcase your ideas to a very broad audience. A few statistics to close. We already saw over 200 people opening the submission, not submitting, because deadline will come and then we'll guide you through the whole process. But still, we have interest, and that's good to see. And we also want to invite you to collaborate with us beyond this competition. Just last week, the German Parliament decided for a federal research center for climate neutral and resource efficient construction. If you look into the publicly available budget, it's 68 million euros. So it's not huge, but still, I think it's a very good starting point. Also to create a community and a network. And I would like to invite you to join this network and to be part of this network. And back to Benno.
Well, thank you, Edel, for these insights and support to motivate our candidates to stay with us and to explain the exceptional value of this procedure. I will go back to my presentation, and this, I hope you can, no, actually, I need to share first. Here we are. This is not only a one-way webinar where you will be invited to listen to some short lectures, but it's also an option for you to raise questions. You're more than welcome to use the Q&A button in the Teams program to send us your questions, and we will collect them here and try to answer them during the webinar. And depending on the number of these questions, we may put them into the Q&A or FAQ section of the competition website. So you're more than welcome to be an active member of this panel. What brings me to Marc Angelil, architect from Zurich and Los Angeles, who has been one of the pioneers of thinking about sustainability, I may say. We know each other for quite a while and have done some interesting adventures together. And Marc has been teaching thousands of young people at the ETH and being an inspiring godfather. And currently, if I'm right, you're still teaching in Harvard, or is that over already? However, it is always super inspiring to listen to Marc. So I will start the presentation and give the mic to you, Marc.
Well, thank you very much. Benno, it's a great pleasure to be part of this seminar, and a great honor to be here together with Edeltraud, Tatiana, Jane, and with you. So I have entitled my intervention re as in the prefix re, or as in redux, that you see here on the cover of a book that we published last year. It's a book entitled Flux Redux, published together with my partners, Sarah Graham, Matej Drasla, and Manuel Scholl, on our adventure trying to address issues of sustainability over the last 30 years, and some successes, but mostly failures that we have done. So this is a book on mistakes that we have made while trying to mitigate the impact of architecture on climate. So redux is a very interesting term in English. It's an adjective, rare adjective used after the noun. The noun is here flux, to qualify that noun. And redux comes from the Latin reducere, which means returning, or we probably know the goddess Fortuna and the expression Fortuna redux. It is the goddess, the Roman goddess, that brings you safely back home. So flux references, of course, the UNU Flores Institutes. It's about the resource of fluxes and the stocks of resources within which architecture is integrated and embedded, but which architecture also channels and reroutes. So what I would like to do is first to show you a sketch that was done about 20 years ago together with an engineer, this one, and then I will focus on one recent case study that my partner Sarah Graham was able to build. So this was a sketch done during lunch with a mechanical engineer and energy expert, and I was drawing quite quickly while he was talking, and I would like to address the diagram on the upper left. You see a house drawn in section with arrows coming in and arrows going out. So those are the stocks and flows that go through the building, but also within which is embedded. And usually what comes in comes out, normally in a form of waste. And so we added a new arrow. We said, okay, we have to return and recirculate those stocks and flows, trying to minimize waste to zero and use the sun as a primary source of energy. So that's the upper arrow leading to the house. And then we said nothing is allowed to be burned. So we crossed out the chimney. And then since we were talking about research also, we said, let's multiply it. And we drew, instead of one house, 1 million houses with an input and output. And at the bottom left are the various resources that need to be addressed. So energy, material, information, capital, water, and people. So next slide. So we recently had the opportunity to do a building. And so the first that I would like to talk about is refuse, because we were asked to demolish this existing building and we refused to do that and instead engaged in a transformation of a barn in Southern California, not far away from the Mexico-United States borders. And so this is a building for the Latino community on a ranch. It's a working structure, but as you will see, it has also many other functions. So next image. So this is the transformation, never demolish. This is the existing building. It was an original barn for horses, and we decided to transform it, next slide, into something entirely new. And we used the building, mined it to build other structure on site and to transform the building with this surplus material that we found it, and we could resource the site. So reuse became a key issue. Next slide is a model of the site, and the existing structure I'm talking about is in the middle of the site on the left. So this was the former barn. And then what is extremely important is this line that goes into the ground because it became clear that we needed to resource the site for energy, materials, etc. And in this case, this is a line that goes to the aquifer. It's a pump that provides water for irrigation, but water also to use. And we're using this constant ground temperature of the aquifer, that's 16 degrees Celsius, to heat or cool the building in the summer or winter, respectively, via a heat pump. So this is extremely important, so we don't use gas or oil to heat or cool. Next slide. This is the machinery that you see. This is the biggest machinery on site. It is the pump that basically secures the livelihood of all the inhabitants of the ranch. Okay, next slide. That pump is activated by photovoltaic panels on the existing structure that we are removing and reusing. Next slide. You see other things that we do, water collection. So every drop of water, because it rarely rains in California, every drop of water is collected and taken back to the aquifer. Next slide. There are other things such as a gigantic compost for organic waste. It's a kind of organic waste recycling apparatus on site. Extremely important because we use this as fertilizers for the ground. And then another important issue, because the entire ranch, next slide, the entire ranch is off-grid, are the septic tanks for the disposal of human waste and the regeneration of human waste. Next slide. So these are some of the infrastructures that are extremely important. Then a few words about the plant inhabitants on the ranch, because it is a working ranch. Vegetables, fruits are being produced, hot peppers and hay for the animals. Any surplus material is either sold or given to communities in need because there's a lot of poverty in the region. So this is an extremely important aspect of what this building is doing, because it's embedded within this framework. Next, a few notes on the recirculation of materials. The existing barn is on the lower right corner. We use the materials to upgrade other barns. Next. And then we stored the materials on site. Next. We stored more materials, an entire material dance on site, because we wanted to avoid bringing new materials for the building. Next, some additional barns were built on the far left. And then next slide, in the continuation of this recirculation approaches, is some material nonetheless had to be brought in from outside for building a bathroom and a kitchen. Next. So those materials, those new materials were sourced from the agricultural sector. There is an entire agricultural industry that produces products that are very rough, raw, robust, extremely important that they are robust. They are locally manufactured and they were affordable. Okay, this is a very extremely interesting market. So those things were used for it. Next, for building the new things. And ultimately, it led us to a fundamentally different understanding of aesthetics and design, which meant that it's a kind of random assemblage of parts that are carefully placed next to each other. So you have photovoltaic on top of a new roof, on top of a structure that we reinforced. We put in some panels, sliding panels in front, and curtains to keep in the coolness or heatness that is produced by the heat pump. So this is not designed a priori, but it is designed through the process by putting the things together. Next slide. A few remarks on the details. So the curtain track, for example, is extremely simple. It is a post-tension cable. The drawers in the second image are made out of the bulb is nothing else than a bulb, or the toilet paper holder is nothing other than a tube put into the walls. So trying to reduce everything to the minimum, okay, reduce to the max. Next. So a few notes on the inhabitants of the ranch. There are 12 humans, majority from Mexico. There are 16 or 18 horses, 3 dogs, 20 chickens, 3 geese, and 2 cats, not to mention the wildlife that constantly crosses the site. So those are the clients for which we were building. Important to know is this is a community of humans and non-humans that operate this ranch, and any profit made is returned as in a cooperative to the community. So no profit is taken out of the regeneration, economic recirculation of the money produced. So it is a working facility. Next. So you see some of the activities on the left. Herbs are being dried. On the right, hay is being stored. In the open part of the barn, next image, and in the closed part of the section, the tables can be brought together to create a bed for guests, overnight guests, or for children doing their homework. So during the pandemic, even before the building was finished, it became the school buildings for the kids, or on the far right, First Communion was being celebrated, so it turned into a party room. So special activities, but also daily activities. And recently, next slide, okay, you need to press twice now. So the kind of mariachi band for a wedding party that was held in the facility. So next slide is the last image that I would like to show you. It's probably the most important space of the facility. It is a workshop to repair everything that breaks down. And as we know, everything always breaks down. You need to maintain it and repair it. And so repair is my last re, after having talked about redux, reuse, recirculate, regenerate, recycle, reuse, recirculate money. So do not forget repair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark, for this very radical project that shows approaches for every re you can imagine. One question, I mean, this is the kind of the second life of that structure. Have you done any precautions that a third life may take over in that construction and tow facility?
Sure, the building is so banal in its construction and so flexible that it could adapt to basically anything you need. Okay? And this has been recently discussed with the users, because they said they wanted, an additional space. So the first idea was to add to it, and then we said, no, there is enough space inside it, so let's adapt the structure to its next phase. Yeah, this is, I mean, to think of buildings on a timeline is extremely important. You're fully right.
Okay, and since it's so banal, people may not fall too much in love with it, because when they're too much in love, they don't dare to change.
No, I think this is exactly the opposite. There is a lot of desire in it, and although at the beginning, you know, the community was disappointed that we were not demolishing the building and building something new, they have fallen in love with the structure. So I think desire. I mean, you're pointing to something extremely important. We have to build up desire with our structures, with whatever we do as architects, engineers, urban designers, etc. Okay, so yes, desire 100%, love 100%.
Well, and relation also to the place you're inhabiting. Is there any questions that came up through our visitors? Or well, then I would go back to the presentation quickly, and maybe we just go on and collecting other thoughts and other inspiring examples. So I would like to pass the microphone. Well, as we learned, not far. It is still within Switzerland, even though Tatiana originally from Mexico City and Mexico, and well-recognized architect globally, I may say, is running her own office, if I'm correct, since more than 20 years. You can't believe it, but it's I'm sharing this experience that you're getting beyond the 20 limit. So Tatiana is going to present us another work, and I'm passing the mic to you, and I will take over the slides.
Yes, thank you, Benno. Well, I started my office when I was 12, but don't worry. So you don't make it. No, just kidding. Thank you, Benno. It's really an exciting webinar to be on. I'm very also excited to be part of this competition. I think we are in a moment where we really need radical ideas to understand how to be able to remain in this planet, because this planet is kicking us out. We have been very bad inhabitants as society. So I hope that we can make a lot of not only ideas, but produce a radical change on how we inhabit here. After the presentations of Barbara, Mark, and Sege, the last webinar, and now this with Mark, I think I'm going to take in a little bit slightly different kind of scope on a vision that I have for this competition that probably is also kind of useful for the participants. I think that there are many possibilities, as Edel was naming, on how to approach this topic. And I think it basically depends on the place where you come from, where you are working on. The local specificity is vital for an idea of no waste. And I think that we live in a moment where things have become truly difficult because our society surrendered to our capacity of production. In this city, in this society, in this world, we cannot exist if we don't first produce. To exist, we need to be able to have a roof on top of our heads. We need to be able to be healthy and well fed. But for all those three basic things, we need to be producers first. The irony and the friction comes when we think that to produce, we first and foremost need to exist. So if we live now in the city of production, and as very well Elisa Iturbe says in her essay, the carbon footprint of modernity, we live in a carbon footprint form. So our whole cities and our whole networks are embedded with carbon on its conception. So how can we overcome the carbon form? I think we have to transform in full our cities of production to cities of care. Next, please. So my question since long has been, what is the city of care? What's the city in which we are able to first live, and then of course, whatever we need to do comes next. So how to hold bodies in the city to exist before they produce has been a question that we have been tackling for many angles. So if you can go next. In the one of the questions I make is the house that we inhabit today. The house that we inhabit today that is replicated not only in the entire world, the typology of the house, it's been embedded in the construction codes of the whole planet. So this house serves the production society, it doesn't serve the care society. What is then the house that serves the care society? It's something that I think it's needed to be challenged. So next, please. I come from, oh, this image is, sorry, half of the image, but I come from a city that, yeah, maybe the next one. Thank you, Benno. I come in a city where, or in a country where waste is reduced to the minimum. Why? Because we don't have abundance of resources. So when you don't have abundance of resources, waste becomes a very different topic and a very different notion and understanding. So in our case is how to, and the second thing is that we don't have a consolidated, let's say, built environment. We have a very precarious, let's say, in the majority, built environment. So how to work with that precariousness, for me, it extends a possibility of then not surrender to the society of production, but to the society of care. And for me, it means to start with the most kind of core structure, which is the house, and how to create circles of care within it in order to be able to hold people to live in these places, and then to be able to allow them to become whatever it's need to become. Next one. So a house of care really needs to think on the reproductive labor that is done there. All the things that we need to be able to exist, which is to be able to be born, first of all, then to be taken care as a child, then to be able to be clean, healthy, and eat correctly. So all these labor that it's behind these, that it's done in our houses, how can we make these more sustainable and more feasible to be done? Spaces for collective care. Next one, in the built environment, spaces for collective food making, for collective care of elderly people, care of children, but also to think how to holistically include in obviously spaces that already exist, because the idea of the city of care is to take the places that exist in the city and to produce spaces that become really spaces that hold bodies to exist. So housing that is not only boxes for people to sleep, but that is taking account that all this labor needs to happen there, that it cannot happen by someone alone or by a nuclear family by itself, because it's unsustainable. That is spaces for a collective endeavor of these sorts. Can you go next? In Mexico, we have also been questioning what does it mean to create spaces of care that are not only private in the private realm in houses, but that are also public. We are currently working on an utopia, next please, which is a community space that it's really able to create a platform for those who cannot transform their houses in places of care to be a place of care. So here the main kind of central area is a social space where you have community kitchen, community laundry, care, elderly care, child care, women's care, for example, doctor's office, but also lawyer counseling services. There's also a recreational area, which there are kind of areas to play, to skate, to just rest. There's a sports area, so you have a dedicated sports area for people who want to become athletes, but also for people to come and have a rehab session in the pool. So there's a pool, Olympic pool, but there's also rehab pools. There's a gym, but there's also kind of strength gyms. And then there is all the cultural areas, like a theater and performance spaces, workshop for music classes. Next one, please. And these, next one, these utopias that are commissioned to different architects in Mexico. Already 16 have been built, and now 100 more will be built in the whole city. So I think that thinking on care could also be transformed into the public realm and could also extend in many different ways. Next one, we have been next one, this is part of the utopias. We think that these centers will not only produce and have, because 16 are built and used, have been produced really good social infrastructure for the city that it's already built. Next one. But also I think that the understanding of the possibility of this, of becoming community centers that knit together people, are also places where the notion of community becomes the sustainable part of the whole built environment. Next one. This one is gonna, it started construction 4 months ago, and hopefully it's gonna be put in place and working the beginning of next year. Next one, please. Next one. The other ways that you can approach this topic, as we have been doing, is understanding how to create possibilities to create spaces for the conversation to happen, for care conversation to happen. Next one, please. We have created several workshops in where we ask the people to bring a piece of clothing that has that they have, that it means something, or probably that they just don't anymore and that they just are thinking of giving away, and to bring it with them. Next one. And we start asking conversations, we start asking questions like, who has cared for this piece of clothing that you have brought to us? What if it has a meaning, this piece of clothes? What is the meaning? Who can you imagine if who has made this clothes, and what has been the process of this clothing, this piece of clothes to have become what it is? At the same time, we ask you to cut the piece and start the conversation with your neighbor and start sewing this piece with your neighbors. Next one, please. So in order to create quilts that are kind of embedding conversations of care of the cloth, of the piece of clothing that you are having, but also in a further sense on what it means to care for our own bodies. Next one, please. So the care of clothes embed a lot of processes of care. It embed also a lot of communitarian processes that are one of the most exploitative processes in the world. Next one, but also the more wasteful processes in the world, which is all the textile industry, but also embeds critical questions of space. Next one. So we have also been using the idea of the public laundry as a place of care. So here in an exhibition in Australia, we did a replica of a public wash basin that it's from the 17th century that exists in a town in Mexico, in Hidalgo. Next one, please. To really profoundly create platforms for the idea of collective care, starting with the idea of public laundries. Next one. Public laundries in our built environment can become also places of community interaction, of community support, which like they were before. Not only that, they are very practical spaces for people to collectivize this labor that can be much more sustainable if it's collectively done for many, many people. Next one. So how these discussions that were kind of the ones that we had in the workshops can become public affairs and can become then possibilities of creating public spaces. And finally, next one, I will talk profoundly in our intervention on the Venice Biennial of this year. We did the pavilion for the Vatican, which has no permanent building in Venice. As you know, or might know, a lot of countries, participating countries, have their own pavilion fixed. The Vatican doesn't, so we got a building that is from the 12th century in the city of Venice. And we needed to think how to present an exhibition for the Vatican in this place. Instead of presenting an exhibition, we really thought that we needed to engage profoundly with the building and with the people around. And we decided to repair the building as a main topic to kind of understand how to also create other processes of repair within not only the physical environment of this neighborhood, but also the social environment of this neighborhood. Next one, please. So what we did is we undertook the task of repairing the building from its smallest point of view, even the particles inside the walls, because they embed a lot of salt. So they're crumbling apart because of that. So going deeply into it, but also going through and trespassing from the important details of an altar that exists in this building from the 14th century. Next one, please. Towards the kind of a much broader idea on repair, of thinking how this really engages conversations on who has the knowledge to repair these buildings and why is held only in a professional, very elitistic society if Venice can only use its buildings if it repairs them, because there's no way of building anything else more. So if everybody needs to repair their buildings and everybody has buildings of exceptional historical values, or a lot of them, how can we spread the knowledge of restoration, of restoring these buildings to a wider audience? So what we're doing here is also kind of, we have the most qualified professionals to repair this building, but they are producing knowledge to the community, because we have workshops that the University for Restoration is doing every Tuesday and every Friday. So to spread kind of the knowledge of repair through different forms of workshops and a lab that is installed in the pavilion. And also kind of opening and widening the public, because why if you are not one neighbor that is interested on repairing a building? What if you are a visitor of the biennial? What if you are just a neighbor that is really not engaged with this topic? Well, then we have a kitchen that allows you to kind of share food, which is something that we all have, and exchange conversations. And then on another layer, we kind of have 6 beautiful instruments that the conservatory plays in this place, because they don't have much space to have more rehearsals. So then we have the students of the conservatory that need to rehearse here here playing music. So kind of all these contaminations that are happening, and you can go next, in this pavilion, are creating processes of repair that it's being translated not only for the repair of the physical building, but also the repair of the kind of surrounding communities. So using and enabling kind of as I said, conversations to enable building processes, but also the other way around, enabling building processes or building programs as the utopias to enable social processes, I think is another take on how to think in the House of No Waste. Thank you very much.
Well, we have to thank you, Tatiana, for this amazing trip through the scales and all of it. And there I see a relation to the presentation of Mark, that it's all about a very human-centered and almost emotional relation to places and situations. And even though every solution is extremely individual, all of it has a very generic meaning. Thank you very much. We have roughly 50 people joining this webinar, by the way. But all of them are almost blasted away, so none of them has any question. So I may pass the word to our next speaker, which will be Jane Wernick, who is maybe giving another scale, and that's, by the way, another reason why I like the previous presentations, because they show the entire spectrum of scales of our task. House of No Waste doesn't mean necessarily one house or one building, as Tatiana's project for the communities, the Utopia, an urban scale that has a meaning, and the scale of Mark's project was more the workshop and the extremely material-oriented solution. So the next speaker will be Jane Wernick, one of the most recognized engineers in the world, and she's standing here and also within our jury. That solutions for the future cannot be made only by one profession themselves. We need to work together. So I'm very thankful that you, representing the engineers in the world, even though architects claim to be engineers themselves, sometimes that you're joining the group here. Jane has been with HÖW Arup for many years, and then setting up her own practice already for a few years, and being recognized, as I mentioned, globally for her work. And I'm moving on with the presentation, and we are curious to listen to your presentation, Jane.
Great, thank you so much, firstly, for inviting me to be part of this great team of people, and especially since the UN it has such a global reach. And I echo the sentiments of others that our solutions maybe have to be quite specific to where we're from, but it's really helpful for us to also know what other people are thinking about around the world, and to see how we can learn from different approaches. So I'm, if I could have the first slide, please. I've coming back to this theme of collaboration. I've been collaborating with the architects David Marks and Julia Barfield since the 80s, and worked with them on quite a few projects. And I now visit their office once a month to do design reviews. And Julia is a founding member of the organization called Architects Declare, which is now part of a bigger organization called Built Environment Declares, which is a global petition which encourages built environment practices to sign up to a declaration to address the climate and biodiversity crises. And they've been focusing their attention recently on how to curate a circular process to reduce total embodied carbon and waste. And particularly they and I were based in London, and some of the issues are quite different in the dense urban situation, particularly in the West, from some of the more rural or projects that we've seen. And they've developed this, what they call an urban mining tondo, which they've been using since 2021. And the idea is to identify donor buildings which are due for retrofit and to create an inventory of the existing materials. And then host projects can then use some of these materials directly, the aim being to make them almost entirely out of so-called waste materials. And they're also looking for possible secondary materials hubs where materials can be stored with material passports. So I'm briefly going to introduce a project which was completed in 2023, which used this methodology and which has become the donor building for a current project, which is going to be a major recipient project for many of the materials released. Next slide, please. So this is their first project using this approach. It's a large office building in London's Baker Street, and it's owned by the developer Lazari Investments Limited. And Lazari were keen that the building should be retrofitted rather than demolished and rebuilt. And Marks Barfield worked with them to utilise the Tondo template. The building was originally built in 1904 and extended in 1936 and had undergone a number of major retrofits and fit-outs. This project has a contract value of £12 million, and using the circular economy approach, they were able to achieve cost savings of more than £1.5 million, so much more, so about 12% of the cost, and to also achieve total carbon savings, which is good. Next slide, please. The exterior of the building, which in appearance is pretty well unchanged, but they did lots of things like introduce double glazing, etc. And the next slide, this is an interior shot of it after completion. The material reuse focused on three things: reuse in situ, so using things that were in the building elsewhere in the building, and also reuse literally where it is, and then also donating to recipient projects. And this project really changed the mindset of the developer, who now insists on, for future projects, an obligation to have a target of 50% material reuse on all their projects, and then to keep very good records of the manufacture, supplier, and certification of everything in the building, using material passports, and then also to mandate that the design is possible for disassembly. Next. Sorry, and it consists of a classroom, an office, and a forest school nursery. So the nursery will be leased out to provide income to make the project financially viable. And it's for a charity called Oasis Play, which runs for children and young people in London. The next slide, please. So the aim here is to only use reused or donated materials on the project, and this is the architect's image of what the project looks like. Next slide, please. They're using their methodology. So the first thing was to look for materials, and this sort of shows the process that they use. So the main donor project is the 22 Baker Street project that I mentioned already, and you can see the host project is this project, Oasis Play, and then they know that they have to store the materials. Next slide, please. So this shows the reuse methodology, and they start to build up the process of gathering the materials, and this is highlighting what the benefits of the process are: reducing costs, saving money for the client, the carbon savings, the reduced material extraction, all of those things, and job creation, and also skill development. Next slide, please. And this is how they this is kind of a sample of showing how they build up their inventory of the materials. So there's this big process of looking for the materials that they need, phoning people up, putting out calls to likely donors, and then just keeping a very careful, detailed list of the materials. Next slide. And this is kind of showing how, on the bottom right, you can see the components that are needed for the building. They're itemized in the diagram on the left, and showing where they're coming from. Next slide, please. And this is, again, showing a build-up. Things that are being reused are in green, or things that are just being donated as smaller components are in grey. So far for this project, which is has now obtained planning permission, but hasn't yet started on site, they found 60% of the materials that they need. Next slide, please. And of course, they have to show where the materials can be stored, and they found a place in tobacco docks. So that's where the materials are being stored at the moment. And so all of the materials are therefore staying within the London area. So there's not huge carbon associated with transportation. Next slide, please. So this is showing how, based on the level of design where they're at, that they anticipate to be able to save more than 50% of the embodied carbon that would have been emitted if they didn't reuse existing materials. The project has obtained planning permission. It has a project cost of £1.2 million, of which £850,000 has been raised. So this is a work in progress, but we're optimistic that it will be built. And we're delighted that at least one commercial developer, Lazari, has decided to use this approach for all their future projects. Next slide. So, and I just finished with this slide which shows how the circular building model can be incorporated through all the work and life cycle stages of a building, from inception to completion, use, and possibly end of use. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jane, for this impressive example from Great Britain. And I think we've seen now 3 presentations about a number of projects that are by themselves somehow radical and, you could say, idealistic. And I wonder, for our competitors or for the next generation that we are addressing with this procedure, how can we convince them that it is convincing to follow this path, and that it's possible to encourage clients, be private or public clients, who typically are afraid of being radical, of being innovative, or because whatever market is against it. What can we give into the sketchbooks of these young, talented colleagues, that they are able to convince their partners in the world, and maybe for the moment to create the right contribution to our competition?
I mean, I think it's really that's partly why they're being so careful to kind of really record everything. And if you can come up with hard facts about how much money a developer can save and how much carbon they can save, it makes it easier to convince people for the next project, because we are dealing in a world where profit still seems to be the main motive, well, particularly in the Western world. And so if we can come up with these kind of facts, I think it's really helpful.
I can imagine, and to have examples like yours, it is easier to refer to that it is possible, because yeah, clients don't trust when there has not been a proof. But yeah, another question is, and that is what Mark, you were addressing, that it needs not only to be convinced by economic arguments, but also to learn maybe about a new form of beautiness and a reception of style or design, that things are changing, and it doesn't need to be only a composition of leftovers when you follow that strategy.
Yes. The economic factors, I mean, the hard factors are usually the convincing ones. So if you can say you can save so much, then you might get somewhere with the client, because economy is still an extremely important aspect of contemporary life in the North and the West. But at the same time, you need to convince our own disciplines. Okay? I've encountered many juries in competitions when we submitted, instead of proposing a new building, a kind of retrofitting of the existing structure, that we were kicked out, okay, again and again. Or recently we submitted a project in which we use similar strategies than Jane recommended in Northern Europe, and the jury said, no, it's too expensive, okay, although we think it's going to be much cheaper. Another aspect would be to have a carbon tax. Okay? So suddenly, clients will be put under pressure to really decarbonize. This could be extremely helpful, although there are lobbies and industries currently in the political spectrum that are fighting against it. For many reasons, since we are living in a carbon society. So there is a lot of political work to be done within the profession and outside the profession in order for such ideas to be brought through.
I'm afraid this is very right. Now we're addressing our own discipline here with this competition and the future of our discipline. Tatiana, maybe there's one more argument. I mean, you have a broad experience, and your projects from Mexico are very beautiful and already quite that they have arrived in the society and being accepted as an attitude. How can you convince designers from Japan or from Malaysia or from wherever in Europe that it's worth taking that path?
I mean, I think when you take the take of having the person, the human in the center, is difficult to get a no. Although, yes, when it comes, as Mark was saying, to the economy then, or the costs of these, it becomes a discussion. But I think that I don't know if I can convince people from all over the world, but I think that one of the tasks is that we are responsible, at least on the places where we can make an impact. No, so take the responsibility and where you can make an impact. What is the best impact you can make? And for me, is aiming for everything, and understanding that I have to fight for one fundamental thing, and for that, taking it further and not leaving it for any reason. And that's the way I think to convince people to have an idea that really tries to make everything, but that you know that the end goal is to change one important thing. Maybe that's the advice I would do.
I think that was a brilliant advice. And there's, by the way, there's now a question. There's a question here coming to you, Jane. Hello, Jane. You talked about referencing materials using material passports. I was wondering how efficient it is when we need to find a material in a build project, or even when we want to disassemble a building. How does it work?
So it's difficult, but it means that there are some people now who are working at this who. In fact, I think in parts of Northern Europe, they're doing it more efficiently, kind of trying to build up a library of materials. But you also need to find someone who's prepared to store it as well, because you very rarely get something coming from a building site exactly on the day that you need it to be delivered somewhere else. But you need to try and plan as much. So it really needs collaboration between the contractors and the builders, the designers, the client, to buy into this. But this idea of the material passport is very helpful, because then at least it means that you have as much information as possible about a particular item to know whether it will be suitable for the final use. And I think already we should be much stricter with clients to say that they must keep all the records of everything that goes into making every building. Because we know in the long term that, okay, the structure may be able to last forever if it's maintained properly, but the finishes and the services are bound to be replaced. And so as much information as can be kept in a good methodology as possible is good. I mean, I thought Barbara Busa's project was brilliant at showing how much you can reduce all sorts of things like bits of carpet or ceiling tiles, and there's so much waste that comes out of not just demolishing buildings but retrofitting.
Well, I would say at the end it's a question about logistics, as it is in the construction industry anyway. I mean, to find the right new material is also a matter of finding it, and there's a passport or an information about the new materials that you get to know. So the market just needs to be convinced that it's feasible. And of course, in the very beginning, it is very little material available. But once the strategy is growing, the market is getting bigger. Edel, you have raised your arm.
Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted to say it in the end, but I think it also fits quite nicely here now, listening to you, but also to the jury members in the first webinar. There are many ideas that we really can bring to this priority action research in the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, like what you said, Mark, regarding the competitions or the material passports or what is beauty. So all those different questions, I think they are really important that we also discuss them from a research perspective. And I just would like to inform you that we go again through the two webinars and collect all the ideas. And if you have competitors, you have ideas for topics that can be included in the discussion of this Global Alliance under UNEP, then just let us know. Thank you very much. And back to Benno.
Okay, we have two more questions here. Please highlight on the certifications that were needed for the clearance. It goes to Jane.
Sorry, could you just say that question again?
Please highlight on the certifications that were needed for the clearance in terms of structural and design.
Oh, I see. So for example, there's glulam, cross-laminated timber panels that are going to be used. So the information about them from where they were being used and what their composition was had to be properly recorded so that the engineer can know what it is that they're designing with the building, and then that would get submitted to building control in the normal way. I mean, I don't know whether the presentation will be available, but if you go back to it, then you could blow up the page that had the sample a sheet on it, spreadsheet on it.
Okay, well, the recording of both webinars is at least available very soon. The first one is already available, and the second will be as well. And here's another question. I'm not sure who it is going to, but in House of No Waste themed projects, design alone cannot fully address the challenge. Making user participation a core part of the system has emerged as a common feature in many example projects. What are the most creative ways to involve users in the design process, which I see from the webinars? It's a very broad question, but maybe Mark and Tatiana, you can share some experiences, how it happened. I mean, it's very depending on the situation, I would say.
I think it's a very good question because it addresses the fact that architecture is not monodisciplinary. It's more than multidisciplinary. It's more than interdisciplinary. It is transdisciplinary, etc. So we rely on a series of factors in any project, okay, from building officials in the city to political parties to clients, etc. And participation is sitting together around a table and discussing things, okay, and negotiating agreements and disagreements are extremely fundamental to any process. Nonetheless, as architects or as engineers, we have our expertise in our own field, and that expertise needs to be brought in and shared. Okay? So this is another form of care that Tatiana talked about, is how to organize these meetings, how to organize the process of getting somewhere together. And the together is, I think, at the core of the UN and the United Nations University. I mean, UN is celebrating 80 years of togetherness. Okay? This needs to be taken care of. We need to take care of the UN because it's our only, let's say, global parliament in which we can come to agreement together.
Very wise words, and there's not much to add. And I'm thinking of how I find now that the twist to my finishing lecture about the procedure. Probably it's first of all to thank you, but there's one. Oh, Jane wants to add. Maybe you can help me.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add about education, undergraduate education, and how. And I think this is fairly universal, that generally your curricula is geared towards you getting accreditation in a certain discipline. And so you work very, very hard at architecture or engineering, landscape planning, whatever it is, law. And you're mostly just working with people who are doing the same thing as yourself. And then you emerge and suddenly you have to face the whole world, everybody, as Mark said, of every single discipline, you know, artists, lawyers, psychologists. You have to be able to communicate with all of them, and to be able to communicate and persuade, you really have to have some understanding of where those people are coming from. And so we, this think tank, I mean, we've been trying to get the accreditation bodies of the main disciplines to sign up to an agreement that says that they will include more collaboration between disciplines as part of the courses, and also to teach climate literacy, and also to include a bit of time in practice as well as part of the training. And I think we need to just focus much more on not just knowing a lot about our own discipline, but really being able to communicate properly.
All right. more wise words, and we hope that they are helping our competitors to prepare their projects. And as I mentioned, I would like to add a few words on the procedure, as it is our experience that there's sometimes misunderstandings in competitions on what is expected exactly and what is needed for a jury to discover the quality of projects that are submitted. First of all, the dates, they're rather simple. Today we're at the second webinar, and there's a few days left where you can send us also your questions through our email address. But at Monday, 1st of December, we have the deadline for the submission. Of course, you can start submitting also earlier and re-enter your project again and again. And the process of submitting is hopefully rather simple in 4 steps. You first have to enter information about the authors. Either it is only one person, one address, but you can also add as many as you want if you are creating a team, which, as it was just mentioned by Jane, is very much liked. Then the second step is designated to the project itself in form of a title and text. And here the advice comes in the next slides that you must be really direct in putting your ideas in words that can be understood in short time by a jury. And the same counts for the images. There's up to 11 images you can submit. And then in the last step, there's a validation step. The jury is, you've got to know most of them in the 2 webinars. And they are also introduced on our website with their CVs, so you get a little bit about background information and now a few hints. Of course, the submission should align with the competition brief and the HØW criteria. There's no need to submit a project that you just have in your shelf and you think, okay, well, let's submit it, even though it is not really made for this project. Either you make an idea for this procedure, I would say, or not, because it is quite challenging what is asked for. What is helpful when preparing the entire presentation is that you put yourself in the position of those who are actually then discussing the projects, so the jury. Imagine that you're receiving a presentation with a few images. Do we understand yourself? You should question yourself if this is, you should not make it for you, but for the jury. And again, after clicking the submit button, you can still re-enter until the deadline and change and correct. The images, they are of course the carrier of the idea. And as I mentioned, you can upload up to 11 images or image files. What doesn't mean that it is 11 images. We don't need 11 renderings of the same position 11 times. Of course, you can have slides that have one image, which is important, but there can also be compositions of diagrams, text plan. I mean, most of you are architects and engineers probably, so you know that to deliver an idea, you need to show different dimensions of the project. And this is more than allowed. And the tools of the jury, they will also allow that we can enlarge some of these images. So don't be afraid that you're too detailed. On the other hand, be concise, be clear, and use direct sentences in your text, and also be bold in images, and put your strongest points in the very beginning. So you have you create the attention of those who are reading it, and use a little bit about graphics. That is always a good recommendation. So much from my side to the very end. I can only say thank you for those who have listened, either now live or later on in the recording. And I thank all our speakers for being part of this webinar, and of course being part of the jury then later on. And to finish, I would like to give the word back to Edeltraud.
Yes, thank you so much. So as I already said in the beginning, it's a vision, but I think with this House of No Waste, but with all the examples and you got during the first and the second webinar, you can already see that we are already one step towards this vision, and I'm sure many of you bring more steps so that all together we can achieve this vision. Thank you so much, and we are looking forward to getting your submissions and maybe before also your questions. Thank you very much.